They will know better than anybody whether or not I'm making an honest decision. And they agreed to it. And I was sworn in as Speaker, and now maybe I'm bragging a little bit. But I presided during that regular session, and it was tough. There was lots of fiery debate out there. There was almost fist fights at times. There's lots of disturbance. And they had these sergeant-at-arms. I had them with sticks, not clubs, just sticks to help me keep order. They sit right in the back of the room, right opposite the speaker stand. And when I'd call on them for help, to maintain order, they'd take these big old sticks and whip that desk back there so nobody could hear what was going on. They couldn't hear themselves quarrel. All right. We went through that regular session. I never had an appeal from the decision of the chair at no time. Now, they had me in some pretty close places, but I would take my time. I was young, remember. I was a pretty young man. And I'd try to think through for the right decision based on the rules, which I was familiar, and come up with the right answer, till finally I won the respect of even those bitter enders who claimed that I had traitored the Democrat Party in accepting the speakership under those conditions. Well, of course, I didn't think so. But anyway, one instance that, of course, the opposition, that was the so-called regulars. They was always looking for something to upset the bind between the irreconcilables and the Republicans. So one day, a question came up in which the House was divided straight down the line on the various factions. They just knew that they had me. They was going to make me upset that coalition by the ruling of the chair if I stayed honest. See? Dave Stovall was the Speaker for the opposition. He's a very able man. Big, fine-looking fella. And so Dave said, Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order. I said, state your point of order, Mr. Stovall. And he stated it. I knew he had me. I knew that if I ruled with him, I'd go to blow this other side. And if I ruled against him, I would have destroyed my reputation. I said, now, gentlemen, here, this is a grave question. I might say that this is an original question. I want to hear, Mr. Stovall, I want you to hear from you further on this point. And then, Mr. Kite, I want to hear from you on this point. I want you to help the chair. I want you to help me to interpret the parliamentary law covering this particular point. And so they debated it. There I was, right in the middle. I said, now, gentlemen, I told you in the beginning, as part of my policy here, to be fair, to ever remember this House regardless of who his alignment might be. I'm going to stay with it. Now, this question you have put to me here, I think is too big for the chair. Under the rules, the Speaker has a right to submit a point of order to the House and let them decide it. I'm going to submit this point of order to the House. When I did, Mr. Stovall said, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my point of order. He let me out of the hole. Of course, I like to reminisce a little about some of those things that I remember. Oh, there's many questions raised in that great session, impeachment session. See, I'm telling you about being through 3 impeachment sessions. I was there in 21 when the House voted impeachments against Lieutenant Governor Ed Trapp and missed voting impeachments against Governor Robinson by a tie vote. The vote was 40-40. And I was there during all those days, but then I stayed long enough that I saw Oklahoma turn around or turn forward or adopt a policy that more in keeping with the new thinking in the state, a new race of people, so to speak. And I saw them turn from the political bickering and fighting and dividing and quarreling on more or less mythical questions, see, partisan questions, into a desire on the part of both parties to adopt, to develop, and enact constructive programs of legislation. And that commenced there about 1935 under Marlin. Now, of course, Murray was a great governor and he had some great measures. But Murray was dramatic. And he was a leader. Well, we shouldn't say I respected him very much, and I would not now say anything to degrade the memory of that great old governor, because he was almost a God-given personality, a man given to the state in the time of great stress and great crises. And he performed magnificently, but he performed on conditions that came from bickering and quarreling and disappointment and despondency and depression and all those things. Well, by the time Marlin came, he come in with a declaration of bringing the New Deal, new measures, new programs to Oklahoma. And that's when we started. And we have been going, I think, in a great style ever since. And I'm proud that I've had a part in it. I was chosen as the Democrat floor leader in the Senate. I was elected in '32. I served under Murray, the second session, and I was loyal to the governor. I worked on his team and his administration. I supported Tom Anglin for governor in 1934, and I expected to be more or less ostracized by the new governor, but much to my surprise, Governor E.W. Marlin adopted me and asked me to take the floor leadership in the Senate. And I managed the campaign for Tom Anglin in the southwest, almost the southwest corner of Oklahoma. But Marlin was a big, broad-minded, generous-hearted man, sincere and conscientious. He saw that if he got anywhere, he was going to have to put these warring factions together, that he wasn't going to divide his administration by what people of the position they had assumed in the race for governor. Of course, I did him a great favor when Tom Anglin run behind him in the first primary. It was myself, Al Nichols, I believe it was, and Homer Paul and several members of the Senate went to Tom Anglin and told him and advised him to withdraw. We told him he couldn't win. Tom, we've been with you all the way, but we can't go any further. You can't win. Now, if we go again, all you're going to do is just going to cause some battle scars here that will not heal very quickly. And so Tom finally agreed, said, all right, all that I want you to do, I'll withdraw. But said, I don't want to sacrifice my campaign manager from Chickasha. What's his name? Chairman of the Corporation Commission. Well, anyway, I won't call his name. He was his campaign manager. Tom said, Paul Walker is resigning to take a position on the Interstate Commerce Commission at Washington. There's a vacancy there. I want you to recommend the appointment to Bill Murray that he'll appoint my campaign manager to a place on the Corporation Commission, which was a very popular appointment. Oh, I'm so sorry I don't call his name right now. And I've known him. He's No, he's an Indian citizen. Indian. I'll think of it. I'll put it back in this thing later. All right. We worked hard. We brought the New Deal to Oklahoma under great, I'd say the most adverse circumstances. The press of the state was not ready. They battled us all the way. Everything we did about welfare, old age pensions, and the imposition of a sales tax to finance it, homestead exemptions, and the workman's compensation, so many measures. Improved those we had and brought in so many new measures that came down, had to be vitalized. If Oklahoma's going to participate in the New Deal that came down Washington, we had to vitalize them with statutory enactment here. But in a way, we didn't miss. We never missed a bill. We passed them. Either in '35, Grand River Dam Authority was one of them. Great many people was against that, and some of the opposition throwed some clinkers into that bill when it was first passed in 35 where they couldn't implement it. They couldn't operate. So we had to come back in 37 and pass the bill off around the Grand River Dam, this great system of hydroelectric power in eastern Oklahoma. The groundwork was laid. The first bill was passed under Morrow. Well, we could go on and on talking about that. But I was the floor leader then. The next year, I retired. I moved from that as the year I moved from from Walters to Purcell.
That'd be 36?
36. I said, no, I'm out of politics. I'm moving because I want to get out. I'm expanding in the newspaper business. I wasn't at Purcell very long till the people there began to solicit me to run for the legislature. Marlin wanted me. He came down to Purcell and conducted a public meeting in which he asked the people there to support me and to urge me to run, that he wanted me to come back. He needed me in the legislature in 1937. Well, I finally consented. Of course, when I say that, some people say, well, you just wanted to be begged, you just wanted to be drafted, so to speak, but you was already going to run anyway. I said, no. All right. He said to me, I'll let you write your own ticket. I said, well, I'll go if you let me be a big legislator in one county. I'll help you to be a big governor in the 76 other counties. He said, you write your own ticket. And I said, one of the things I want is a new free bridge between Purcell and Lexington. Take that old death trap out of there.
I remember that one.
He said, I will build it. I'll start it before you get in office. If you'll come on back and help me. All right. I made some other requests on public roads. That's about all I requested. I want him to designate some state highways in the western part of the county and down through Washington. That's the town right west of Purcell. He said, you don't ask for anything extreme. He said, I'm glad to do everything you've asked for. So I came back, and he brought me back to offset Red Phillips. Red was a power, and he was a good debater, good thinker, and he had a following. And so we battled Red down to the last ditch over the speakership in the House. Marlin wanted me to be Speaker, but I saw that there would be some members of the House who wouldn't vote for me on the grounds that I was then a state senator and didn't want somebody from the Senate to come back and run the House. So I stepped aside and nominated Daniels, J.T. Daniels. And I took the floor leadership, which is far more important to Marlin than the speakership, because it's the man on the floor that gets the work done. And so we took his list of bills. He'd come every day. He'd have a list of bills he'd want to pass. And either come bring them up there or send them in, and I'd go down there and get them. We never missed a bill, not one. We passed his entire program all the way through. Some of it got crippled a little, but with all the opposition to the so-called progressive measures that came up. Well, I'm probably talking too much about the legislative program. I know you'd rather hear me talk more about my own personal part. I was floor leader in the House. Then next year I was elected to the Senate. I went back to the Senate under Red Phillips, and we were not on very friendly terms. And finally we composed our differences, and I worked with Red into the enactment, the passage of the resolution submitting the budget balance amendment and some other measures. We got along all right. And then came Bob Kerr, a great constructive statesman, a great constructive thinker. And we worked closely in bringing new programs to Oklahoma. Then came Roy Turner. And by that time, the legislative committee had been created by statute or by resolution. I served as chairman of that committee that wrote the program for Roy Turner. And we put it down in black and white and published it in book form. And we passed it. Some of the greatest reforms, some of the greatest measures that ever been on the statute book. The new budget balance, the new auditing and bookkeeping amendment or statute that puts us up among the first states in the union in the matter of accounting and bookkeeping. Now we know how many men's employed by the state every day of the year. We didn't know at that time. We know how much money we have in the banks every day of the year. how much payroll we have, all that. We never had been able to get it before centralized. Well, anyway, we wrote this program, and then we successful that we decided to establish a legislative council, which I consider as a study group or study committee, a research committee in which the members consult with each other, they study together, they brief questions together, they research together during the interim of the legislature. So when the legislature comes into session, they're informed to that extent they're qualified, see, to pass on these measures and to develop better legislative measures for the government of the state. I was elected the first chairman of the Legislative Council and inaugurated or introduced it into the government of Oklahoma. I served as chairman of the Committee on Revenue and Taxation in both houses at different terms. I served as chairman of the Appropriation Committee once in the House, but my particular preference was revenue and taxation and constitutional amendments and code revision. In one session out there, the last session I served in the Senate, I served as chairman of the Joint Committee.
Who was governor then, sir?
Governor at that time was Roy Turner. I served as chairman of the Committee on Revenue and Taxation, Code Revision, and Constitutional Amendments, which was the heart of the legislative program. Yes, that's the last time I served I went out with Roy Turner in 1951. I went back later. I dropped out. I thought I'd quit politics. I did go back again, was elected in 52. I was immediately elected Speaker of the House and served as Speaker of the House 53, 54 under Johnson Murray. Then again, I was elected and served under Raymond Gary in the House and under Howard Edmondson, one term under Howard Edmondson, in which I participated, of course, but not as actively as I had been petitioned as a floor leader, and I was chairman of the Revenue and Taxation under Howard Edmondson. But I had a long career of great experiences, and I do feel proud of the fact that I gave that much time to the state in helping to develop a pattern of government that fits the people of Oklahoma and a pattern that the people seems to be relatively well satisfied with.
Thank you, Mr. Nance. Would you give us a rundown on your family as of today, and basically what you're doing in Purcell?
I'd be glad to. I'm proud of my family. Naturally, anyone would be. I'm the proudest I am, I guess, of my great-grandchildren. I don't think I'm quite old enough to retire, but I'm old enough to be the grandfather of 10 children. The youngest is 1 year old, and the oldest is 10 years old. I have 2 daughters, both of them newspaper women. Both of them attended the University of Oklahoma. One of them is a graduate of the School of Journalism. That's Mrs. Betty Nance Langdon at Mangum. She is a co-publisher, co-owner of the Mangum Star and the Greer County News. My other daughter is Mrs. Rosamond Nance McCurdy of Purcell, who is a co-publisher and an editor, one of the editors of the Purcell Register, and has been for several years. And I have a son in California who was originally a newspaper man who's been in the advertising business in California in the last few years. He has one daughter who lives in California. She has 3 children. They're my grandchildren. They live at Seal Beach. Her name is Hobie, Mary Elizabeth Hobie. She's married to a man by the name of Joe Hobie, who's with the Harvey Aluminum people at Torrance, California. He is one of the specialists in that manufacturing industrial operation there. They're very happily situated, and I think they're very prosperous. I have a grandson. I have, 4 grandsons. One of them is Tom McCurdy, who is a graduate of the School of Journalism, who went to to the Army as soon as he graduated and came out a captain in the intelligence division. He's now with the Purcell Register, expects to succeed me as the publisher. A second grandson is Rick McCurdy, James Richard Rick McCurdy, who graduated from the Oklahoma School of Medicine in June. He had a fine career in the University of Oklahoma playing on Bud Wilkinson's football team. He made the first string from the time he arrived, played 3 years. And Tom McCurdy also made the first string basketball team. That's my oldest grandson. I have another grandson, Ben Langdon, Jr., who is working on a doctor's degree in the University of Oklahoma. I think it's biochemistry. It's an advanced science of some nature. And I have my youngest grandson is graduating from the high school in Purcell this year and expects to enroll in the university, and we think he's going to be another athlete. He has played quarterback on the Purcell High School team for 3 years, and he has been quite an artist in throwing the ball. We think that he might get a chance to throw a few footballs for Fairbanks at the university. We don't know. Then I have another granddaughter at Norman who's married to Jeff Diamond, who is a law student, and she's graduated from the university last year and is teaching school in Norman. Jeff Diamond, we're proud of him as a great-grandson. His father is Jeff Diamond, an oil man at Holdenville, and his grandfather was Harry Diamond, a lawyer and oil man at Holdenville who was a member of the Board of Regents of the university back quite a few years ago. And Tom McCurdy has 4 children. They're my grandchildren. Rick has 1 child, James Richard Jr. And the 3 in California, 4, 3 is 8, and 9. Did I say 9 or 10? Well, let's see, there must be another one in there somewhere. That's my family. They all of them live in Oklahoma, active in Oklahoma, except my son, 1 son, and my granddaughter in California. My wife, Mrs. Nance, the grandmother and great-grandmother, is a native of Oklahoma. She was born at Cameron in what is now LaFork County. Her father was serving at that time. He's a white man. Her mother was an Indian woman, part blood, mixed blood. He was serving as clerk of the federal court there. And she and her entire family were allotted lands as members of the Choctaw tribe down in Garvin County. Even though they were Choctaws, they were allotted land in the Chickasaw Nation, which was very fine land. I imagine my father-in-law, who was a clerk of the federal court, probably had acquaintances on the Dawes Commission some way or another.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Nance. We appreciate the interview. We hope that you'll have many more years with all these grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
I might say, Streeter Jr., that Streeter Flynn Jr., it's all right to mention your name. I could go on and on. I could sit here and talk by the hours about my experiences in Oklahoma as a newspaperman and as a public officer. I had the opportunity today to pay tribute to Roy Johnson, who was an early day member of the Oklahoma Highway Commission, who as a member of the commission that gave this system, this state, its first system of connected highways, that laid the groundwork for our connected system of roads now, where you can start somewhere and go somewhere from any town in Oklahoma. Roy Johnson was a great state builder. He lived at Arden. His family is here. His son, Dr. Obie Johnson, was at the meeting of the Oklahoma Memorial Commission today when Governor Holloway dedicated a portrait of Roy Johnson. Roy Johnson was appointed, he was a Republican, but he was appointed by a Democrat governor, Edward Trapp, and he served on the commission with with French gentry of Enid and what's the man from Tulsa who was a road builder, pioneer road builder from Tulsa. Anyway, it was good for me. I started with those such men as them. I was acquainted with the first state highway commissioner and with all members of the highway commission. I've been associated in some form or other with every governor of this state, starting with Haskell. Now, I was not in the legislature. I was not in the newspaper business when Haskell was elected, but after he left office, I became acquainted with him and had a fine friendship with Charles N. Haskell, the first governor of the state. I might mention that I spoke earlier, as the man I spoke of earlier was William B. Anthony. William B. Anthony was a member of the legislature from Stevens County. He was the man that owned the Marlow Review, from whom I bought the paper. He served 3 terms in the legislature. He served a part of a term as speaker, but in that day, as I told someone a while ago, the nepotism laws were not observed very well in that day. As a member of the legislature, he also served as private secretary to Governor Charles N. Haskell. A lot, as I say, I could go on for hours and hours of reviewing the history of this state. My association with this state has been very, I'd say, very refreshing, meaningful. I don't know what all.
Thank you, Mr. Jim Nance, statesman and leading citizen of Purcell, Oklahoma.